welcome in. It's pro football today on another Sunday in the National Football League with action already ongoing in Germany, the Panthers and the Giants. We will break this down. We will set you up for an excellent Week 10 slate. Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, and Joe Lisi. Man, Lisi, we've got a lot of good games to break down here today.
We do. Steelers Commanders are one. We'll see if Russell Wilson can get his first road win against Jaden Daniels. Today we have the marquee battle, Jared Goff and Detroit going on the road to face off against the Texans. And we have Kansas City and Denver, divisional matchup. And, oh, by the way, Christian McCaffrey back for San Francisco. We'll see how they play on the road in Tampa today, Donnie.
Yeah, for me, the marquee games, again, it's a shame it's 1 o'clock, Pittsburgh, Washington. I thought that should have been a 4:25 start, but I think that game is probably the marquee one of the day. Two teams looking to sort of have that ascension in the AFC and the NFC. And also, if you do have a Washington win today, where does that put them on the pantheon of trustability and then also heading into a Philadelphia game on Thursday night? But that Sunday night football game, you know my squad out there. The Detroit Lions coming in loaded for bear against those Texans. I like the card today. We'll have some fun, gentlemen.
Yeah, one game that we would have anticipated, no matter the records, being a big one was Dallas and Philadelphia. Yeah. Instead, we're talking about a 3-5 Cowboys team who is going to be without their star quarterback in Dak Prescott, not just for this game, potentially the rest of the season. They are considering season-ending surgery on a hamstring injury that Dak, Donnie, was under the impression coming off the field against Atlanta wouldn't even keep him out in this game against Philly.
Yeah, it looks like now we might be talking a minimum of 4 games, which is going to be tough at this point. And then also at the same time, you're looking forward to the rest of the season with Cooper Rush can sort of hang around if need be. But from all intents and purposes, if he's getting shut down for the season, the Dallas Cowboys, Joe, completely shut down.
Yeah, they have nothing to play for right now. I'm on the outside looking in for potentially a wild card appearance. They haven't won a home game yet. You see those playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, inconsistent, struggled on the road last week against Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons. That was a winnable game. They didn't step up, lose it by 6. And now they come back home to a team in Philadelphia that quite honestly is hitting on all cylinders, right? I mean, if you're looking for a killer instinct, this is the team to do it. Going to be a bad matchup, 7-point dogs. We'll see how it plays out. And what are you going to get out of Cooper Rush today? That's the main factor, Kev.
Yeah, I'm really excited to watch that one still play out, though, because Cooper Rush has had a knack for covering numbers in replacement for Dak. Though it's been a while, 2022, the last time Cooper Rush really had to take that fill-in duty for Dak Prescott. To stick with the NFC East, the Giants are out in Germany right now playing a Carolina Panthers team that all of a sudden has Bryce Young looking pretty good. Played maybe one of the better games of his pro career against the New Orleans Saints last week. Pulled off a win, 7-0 early. Bryce is 7 of 8 for 78 yards and a touchdown. There's definitely a Giants angle of this, Lisi, but Bryce Young, a quarterback I know I was high on coming out of Bama, I feel like you were pretty in on as well. Maybe getting enough time here, maybe the benching worked. Playing some good football.
He is. The reset helped, you could say, right, in regards to, his progression. He looks more confident. He made plays last week against New Orleans in that ball game. A lot of people thought Derek Carr coming back in New Orleans would just steamroll them. They got the rushing attack going with Chuba Hubbard. He's got 83 yards already in the first quarter of this matchup. Yeah. When you can run the football, put your quarterback in a better position, especially in third down situations. But I will say he's spreading the football all around the field, and he might throw for 3 touchdowns today, Kev. We were maybe just 1 week early.
I got to tell you, too, you're looking at a football game where two teams obviously not going anywhere at 2-7, but Daniel Jones on his way out. Could Bryce Young be on his way back in for the Carolina Panthers? Something to watch. But also, here's what we talked about this so many times. They go overseas. They're playing on grass as opposed to turf today. I had a nice little same-game parlay that I was teeing up ready to go today, and I completely backed off it. But I got to tell you, I'm feeling good about it right now. I had Daniel Jones plus 175 plus. End of the first quarter, 3 yards, 1 of 5. I had Tyrone Tracy, 40 yards plus rushing. He's got 1 carry for 2 yards already in this ball game. The guys that I wasn't looking forward to, Bryce Young, lighting it up already, 7-8 yards and a touchdown pass. And Chuba Hubbard, who just got paid, 9 carries, 83 yards. What a great game, guys. That's the first quarter.
The record is in range, according
we
to
might
Donnie.
be seeing unbelievable things this morning.
But on the Giants' end of this, a loss here would send them down to 2-8. By the way, Daniel Jones has 3 first-quarter passing yards, so electric stuff out of him. As always, this team will hit the bye and then they will play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and who cares who they play, I guess, right? Could they possibly make a huge move out of the bye if this ends up a loss here to Carolina? Coach, quarterback?
Yeah, I think quarterback is one that they had said that Daniel Jones wouldn't start anymore till they were mathematically eliminated at 2-8. How is this team going to make the playoffs? I can't see it. So whether it's this week, the week after the bye, maybe they move on from Daniel Jones not starting the rest of the regular season. What are you seeing out of this offense right now? Haven't seen it. It hasn't been consistent. That Monday night game where he has the game, potentially to tie it or even win it in the fourth quarter. Bad throw, errant throw, just poor decisions on a consistent basis, Kev. How could this organization keep him?
I mean, go ahead, Don.
I'm just going to say, that, forget about the Giants and moving on from Daniel Jones. You got to move on from every single person in that front office, because you can't tell me, hey, we're buying back in on Dable. He's a good coach. You don't lose to the Carolina Panthers, who are 2-7, and drops you to 2-8 on the season and not survive that, because it's not as if we're looking back on fond memories from Dable. Yes, he caught a little bit lightning in a bottle 2 years ago, got into the playoffs. They severely regressed last year, and they're even worse this year. What confidence from a general manager and a coach can turn this around? Oh, just give us our guy a quarterback. No, you chose your quarterback by getting Daniel Jones and bringing him back into a big contract. Both should be out for me.
I wouldn't, if I were in charge, fire Brian Dable. Because I just blame so much of this all on Daniel Jones. I mean, it's not fair to say it is all his fault, but I think we saw the progression Dable made during his time in Buffalo with Josh Allen. I think we saw the year one progression he was able to make with Daniel Jones. And I think, man, you cycle through coaches so often in this league, there's no guarantee you're going to love your next guy. It's tough. Now, if you do keep Dable, you better, at least he's an offensive guy, because you cannot do what the Chicago Bears have done.
Right.
Again.
Arsala.
Well, I mean, again, right? But the Chicago Bears, right? And, the Bears today, they're playing the Patriots, where does anybody think Matt Eberflus survived this season with the way things are going now?
No, but this was the concern with the Bears, right?
Yeah.
We said it
Amazing
last year that, they kept them because they won 7 games, and the defense got better down the stretch. They made some free agent moves last year towards the end of the regular season that panned out, but they still had concerns about Justin Fields, and they weren't sure if they were going to move on from Justin Fields or draft Caleb Williams, right? Once they got Caleb, then it's like, okay, is Matt Eberflus the coach to coach him up from a staff perspective? This is the same situation, Kev, that we have with Justin Fields last year.
Yeah.
There's just more weapons now, and now you have a kid that maybe you could develop into that franchise guy, but who's going to do it?
That was the whole question, because I thought you would have had maybe the best overall roster of coaches that you could have brought into Chicago, because even if you say you don't like the franchise itself, which, again, it's a big city, they've won big in the past, 20, 30 years ago, but you can tell somebody and say, you're going to have a devastatingly good young quarterback who, if you can develop, you're going to be here for 10 or 15 years. Also, a defense that is decent, a lot of actual payroll money that you can use, and they ended up saying that Waldron and Eberflus. Yeah. This is what you get.
Right. So I'll throw 3 names that potentially could be head coaches next year for them. Kingsbury, Slowick, and Johnson. And I'm just throwing like
Ben Johnson, Chicago.
But would he go in same division?
1,000%.
You think he would?
1,000%.
Yeah, I think if it's
got to be somebody like that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think if he believes it's the best job on the market, I think that's exactly where he's going to go. And I think it's, at the minimum, if you're the Bears, you're encouraged that there's going to potentially be a number of options out there for you. But did you waste the season? Because this is a team that, had some juice early on, and the way they did not get off of the mat for that game against Arizona plays a big one against the Jets. But we go to the other rookie quarterback. That would be Jaden Daniels in his game with the Steelers next.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, it's going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take the room.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
One of the big upsets of the season is your Week 10 game of the day coming from the Washington Commanders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Preseason expectations were not kind to either one of these teams. Far more likely to finish last in their division than win their division. Both have a legitimate shot to take their division down. Pittsburgh continuously finding a way, whether it's Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. The Commanders and Jaden Daniels have impressed, and now the defense is starting to find their level and covering for maybe a bad game here or there out of the offense, which has still been a tough group to keep down. It's what T.J. Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers defense will try to do here. The total for this one is 44.5. As the Steelers are off a bye, they're just a 2.5-point underdog. Lisi, when you dive into this game, what do you look for?
Well, it's an interesting matchup. You have two teams that have won 3 straight. The Steelers have won 3 straight. Russell Wilson, 2 games under center by 16.3 points per game. On the flip side, you have Washington that have won 3 games by 13.4 points per game. They have won 7 of the last 8 games in the season this year. So they're running the football. Jaden Daniels, 206 through the air. We saw Chris Rodriguez break out, Noah Brown as well. The concern that I have is Russell Wilson making his first career start, even though he's a veteran with this club on the road. I like the way the defense is playing for Washington. 4-0 at home, Kev. They're playing with house money right now. They're confident, and I like what they have. I'm going to take the Commanders, but I do feel we get through the 44.5.
I think it's a great game. I really do. And you know me, I'm high on the Steelers here. Got a lot riding here on Russell Wilson, hot takes. But to be honest, I look at this football game, and I think it's a pretty even matchup. The one way I would sort of lean slant is, yes, we know Russell Wilson's been around the block, Super Bowl champion quarterback, looking much better here over the past 2 weeks than he did out of that first start over that first, let's just say, 2 to 2.5 quarters. But also understand this, defense does still win championships in the NFL, and the better defense by far for me is on the Pittsburgh Steelers side. That is a hellacious pass rush that's going to be coming after a rookie quarterback. And the one thing that we do know is it's always tough to win with rookies, but Mike Tomlin's record against rookies is really good. 20-4, 21-4, something like that since he's been around. Now, if I'm being optimistic about this game, I think Russ has a big game. I think George Pickens has a big game. I think Najee has a big game. For me, it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive pass rush that's going to win this game. I'll lay the take the 2.5 points in this game with the Steelers.
Looking at this game, I wondered if we would see +3 reappear in the market this morning. It's going the other way. More flat 2s coming around. People are betting Pittsburgh here. I wonder how much of that is Mike Tomlin against a rookie quarterback.
Yeah,
right.
I wonder if we're at the point in the calendar where bye weeks are going to become more important than we think. Pittsburgh not only off of a bye, Washington playing their 10th game in a row. They have one of the later byes in the National Football League. this season. I think with home field advantage, Washington is appropriately placed as a favorite, though I'm not expecting them to necessarily run away with the game like this year. I am expecting Jaden Daniels, though, to have a big game and get through the 222.5 passing yards prop with a level of ease. The 3 games he's missed this. His last game, which, for me always then makes me think a bounce-back spot. The game he was injured in, which doesn't really count. And then his NFL debut against Tampa Bay. He's been very good at getting through this total. And I've talked about fading the Pittsburgh secondary back when we were covering their Monday Nighter against the Giants, and they allowed Daniel Jones to throw for over 260 yards in that game. Against a complete game healthy quarterback, they consistently give up a lot through the air. Outside of the great debut or open to their season in Atlanta against Kirk Cousins, we are seeing quarterbacks get through this number with a lot of ease. And I think for Jaden Daniels today, they'll be pushed a little bit more than maybe they were in their past few games. When you think about the Giants and the Chicago Bears, I mean, he didn't play the game against Carolina. Obviously, that offense didn't have a lot of threat to them as well. I expect Jaden Daniels to do his job and get through the total. I'm interested to see if the Washington defense, no Marshawn Lattimore doesn't make the debut, who has struggled against number 1 wide receivers, has actually fixed that. Because against Baltimore, Zay Flowers lit them up. Since, again, they've done a nice job limiting. Malik Neighbors last week on 9 catches doesn't even break through 60 yards. What does George Pickens give us here today? Can he get into that 80, 90 range here, Lisi, or does Washington have an answer for that Russ Pickens connection?
Well, it might be secondary options. It could be Calvin Austin. He's a speedier type of wide receiver. 21.5 is his number today. Could be Freiermuth as well underneath it, taking away the long shot. Maybe Freiermuth and those tight ends like Darnell Washington get involved. And I'll throw out Mike Williams. I believe his number's 11.5, the new addition from the New York Jets, underutilized with Aaron Rodgers. He could be a role player, especially in terms of red zone opportunities. I'll throw another name out on the Washington side, Kev, because if Jaden Daniels blows through his number, right, which I believe as well, and Donnie said, very over-aggressive defense, the running lanes should be open, but not just the running lanes for Jaden Daniels. It's secondary options. Eckler coming out of the backfield.
Sure.
26, 27.5 in the receiving game. We saw Breece Hall have 100 yards, I believe, a couple weeks ago. Keep an eye out for that.
By the way, you're also taking a look at a Washington football team that Marshawn Lattimore was a great move here, but not going to be active today on the field. And also, number 2, Brian Robinson Jr., also not going to be playing today, which brings me into my next point, gentlemen. You're playing the Steelers today. That's a tough game, but they understand the task. Yeah. Thursday night football in Philadelphia is an even more monstrous game. Now, I'm not saying Washington is packing it in. That's completely not what I'm saying. But if Brian Robinson could have gone today, they make sure he goes for the Eagles game. If Lattimore was questionable for this game and could go, they make sure he goes in the Eagles game on Thursday night. So it's a really tough spot that Washington, a young football team trying to learn. They have that circled on their schedule for the Philadelphia Eagles game coming up on Thursday night. I want to see how that plays into it. Now, the maturity of this football team, it's how you're going to win. Remember last week I said, I'm a little bit worried about Washington. They just had that exciting victory over the Giants, exciting victory over the Chicago Bears, on that final Hail Mary. How would they handle themselves against the Giants? They did. So the trust level's there.
I, by the way, on the Marshawn Lattimore edition, I'm excited to fade that when the opportunity comes. Lattimore had an unbelievable rookie season for the New Orleans Saints and has never been that good in any of the following seasons for New Orleans. Listen, he has talent in him. Maybe Dan Quinn can unlock something. He's not a top 5 cornerback. This idea that Washington just got someone to eliminate half the field, please let him debut on Thursday. Please let him debut Thursday because A.J. Brown's already got $120 on the score on his head if that's what's going to happen here. I'll tell you that right now. We'll talk about A.J. Brown and the Cowboys, but not before we get to Sunday Night Football. The Detroit Lions train rolls into Houston. Can it be stopped? We'll break it down next.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take the room.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions. Once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
The Detroit Lions just keep getting the job done. 7-1, unbeaten on the road. They won outside. No dome, no problem. Oh, their offense actually didn't look that good, but that's okay. That's not really the point with the Lions. It's all about the fact that they're 7-1 and that Donnie has some NFC futures on him, so he might as well be a Lions fan. So, Donnie, I'll allow you to start. They go to play the Houston Texans, who are unbeaten at home so far this season. They do so as 3.5-point favorites. What do you expect?
Easy, Joe. Easy. Press the button there. -3.5 should be 6.5. Altered up, as Joe says, 9.5 in this game. Why? Because the Detroit Lions are coming for souls today. People, absolutely. But also, I love C.J. Stroud. Told you at the beginning of the season, thought this team was going to win the division. I still think that's going to be the same. However, things do change. Nico Collins is going to come back today. Hamstring injury, probably not. Take a look at Tank Dell. Oh, no, what's my back hurting today? Probably not in there. Will Anderson, hey, could use him to rush the pass rusher, or rush the quarterback. He's not there either. Now, again, sometimes I'm facetious by saying it's easy, but there's no way, shape, or form. Look at me right here. That we're taking the Houston Texans, Detroit all the way by a touchdown.
I like Houston in this matchup. I think it's a bounce-back spot. This is where we disagree. Now, the numbers suggest Detroit's playing and should win this game, right? They've won 6 straight. The numbers are dominant. They've won the 6 by an average margin of victory, Kev, of 18 points per game. To your point, they are 7-1 on the year, undefeated on the road. But on the flip side, you have Houston, that's 4-0 at home. They haven't covered numbers. They've looked a little bit inconsistent, but I think it's a bounce-back spot for C.J. Stroud in that offense. Look for Dalton Schultz to get involved. Look for Joe Mixon as well, not just in terms of the ground, but the receiving game as well. And I think they pull off the upset. Not going to be easy, but I believe D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud in this particular spot with back-to-back road games, prime time, give me the Texans outright.
I think it's a great spot to bet the Texans, and that's exactly what I'm going to do at 3.5 at home. I mean, at the end of the day, I know, first of all, I know this will never apply to you because a team has to catch double digits for you to think that they could cover in a loss.
Correct.
I've never believed that, and I very much think Detroit could win this game by 3, quite frankly. The Texans are unbeaten so far at home. Now, they've not been dominant at home. They don't win these home games by, I think their biggest home win this season was by 6, laying 6 to the Chicago Bears on that Sunday night. But I do think getting Nico Collins back, because I think he's going to play Donnie off of the IR stint, is certainly a boost. Detroit is also kind of banged up coming into the game. A lot of defensive guys on this injury report, And they add Taylor Decker to the mix, where if all of a sudden that offensive line leaks a little bit, it could make up for the fact that Houston is going to be without Will Anderson in this game, which is certainly a blow. It's also just for me a bet on C.J. Stroud, who I think is proven to be one of your, let's call it 10 best quarterbacks in football, and is in line to have himself a really good game. Because Stroud is now battled with some inconsistency the last few weeks. Some of it's been situational, but he's only thrown for over 200 yards once within his last 4 games. And again, at home, I expect better from CJ. His best target in Nico Collins in the offense here. I think the Texans can do certainly enough to stay within a field goal at home in a game against the Lions.
Yeah, we'll see also, because Nico Collins, I think, is a game-time decision. So if you're taking a look at the Houston offense, which, again, coming to the season, I absolutely love. No Stephon Diggs, no Tank Dell, possibly no Nico Collins, could be a formality. And also, if you are a game-time decision, what does that actually mean for your gameplay and your snap count at that point? Nico Collins is fantastic, a top 5 wide receiver, which when he does get back healthy, that Texans offense is going to move. And also keep in mind, Jamison Williams back here for the Detroit Lions. Now you have that deep play threat on one side, Amon-Ra St. Brown on the other, tight ends, best offensive line in football, 2 dominant running backs, which again, legitimate chances for them to score touchdowns. I just think Detroit is too much on offense tonight for the Houston Texans. That's why I'm picking them.
Yeah, I like the over too, though. If I'm back in Houston, I'm also back in the over. And to Donnie's point, Jordan Love did throw in the second half of that matchup for 273. That was a wet track. We saw Jaden Reed over 110 yards in that matchup. So that could do well for Nico Collins, especially in this matchup in terms of the cornerbacks that he'll face. So I think C.J. Stroud's going to chuck it. I think he throws it between 35 and 40 times in this matchup, maybe 45. I don't think Mixon will be as dominant on the ground against that front seven. They throw it more, spread them out, and then you could run it in the second
Real
half.
quick point on that, too. You know, sometimes I like to get down on the underdog plays for me. If Mixon does not hit his number on the ground, and if Mixon does not score a touchdown, not winning that game, I would be betting Joe Mixon as opposed to betting Houston for me.
All right, we'll see if it plays out that way. I think Stroud has to step up in this spot. We'll see if he's able to do that against a team that has been absolutely fantastic so far. It's Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. We'll be right back.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, guys?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
All right, back with you right here on Sports Grid. A quick update in Germany. 3rd and 1. The Giants ran a flea flicker. Daniel Jones was sacked for a loss of 8. They will be punting.
Sounds like a good head coach.
These were two teams in terms of Carolina and New York who were relevant to the deadline because teams were calling them for their players, not because they were buyers at all. If you look at deadline day, the biggest move was Marshawn Lattimore, which was made by the Washington Commanders. I'm not sure anything else really came close. There's some moves that happened before deadline day that you could argue were as big, if not bigger. Davante Adams to the Jets, DeAndre Hopkins to Kansas City. A lot of the wide receiver movement was stuff that we were talking quite a lot about on our show. I think we can get into some of the exacts in a second here, but Don, was there anything from the deadline that really stood out to you?
Not necessarily, because I think the teams that made the moves, were in the right position for those. Like, you didn't want to go, like, for me, let's just take the Baltimore Ravens out. Boy, if they could get Davante Adams or swing for a real number one wide receiver, that'll shift the scales. No, it doesn't. That is an unbelievable offense now that added Deontay Johnson, which looks like they might want to send him packing already with the type of performances that he's getting. Mm-hmm. You take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers out there needing a secondary threat, but didn't want to go all in and sort of disrupt their game plan. They get Mike Williams, who I really think is going to be a help on the outside. There wasn't really anybody outside of, let's just say, Detroit, who I think made a great move with Zadarius Smith. If they really wanted to ladder up, which you're talking about, like, hey, maybe you can go out and get like a Myles Garrett to be like an all-in type of situation. But I thought it was an eventful and fruitful deadline, Joe, for me, because I think teams picked up where they needed, but I didn't see one. I was like, ooh, they really made a mistake by not doing this, or maybe they didn't swing for the fences.
Yeah, I like the moves that Pittsburgh made in terms of Preston Smith and Mike Williams because I think both of those players can contribute in down the stretch, especially for a playoff run, and I believe Mike Williams will have a factor potentially in terms of today's game. I'll throw out Minnesota. We saw Darrisaw go down. They get Cam Robinson to solidify the offensive line, and Cam Akers as well is still a productive running back to bail out Ty Chandler and Aaron Jones. They've both been injured throughout the year, so that can benefit Sam Darnold in the rushing attack. So not bad moves. They didn't cost a lot, but I think Minnesota did a pretty good job as well.
I think to me what is interesting, we don't have within the NFL still, I guess, the level of Major League Baseball or maybe even within the NBA of sellers, where you can come in and call a team and actually extract superstars. Mm-hmm. Lattimore, again, is close to that situation, but, man, there's a big distance for what was done on deadline day. Davante Adams was a very unique situation, and Hopkins is more – look, I think he's going to – clearly had a great game for Kansas City, but Hopkins is not one of the 5 best receivers in football anymore. That's just the reality. We wondered – if people were going to be able to call the Cleveland Browns and successfully get big Myles Garrett offers on the table. And I don't know if it was something that the Browns would ever consider, but I wonder if just the way the NFL is, they would never consider it, right? Where even if the Lions did offer up the outrageous suggested 2 firsts, Gibbs, 2 seconds, Goff, what would actually have the reaction been there? Because on one end, just using the Lions as the example, because that's who if they brought Myles Garrett in, I'll tell you what, I also would have been betting Detroit minus 15.5 tonight. Like, you got to be kidding me. I wonder if there is some still hidden value within the NFL, because I think it's something that teams still don't really want to do, of embracing a tear-down tank and giving yourself some time to process, Donnie, a little bit at this level.
And also, the NFL is getting, because I always say, like, when I was growing up, 80s and 90s, whenever we have Adam Kaplan on, it's like nobody ever made a trade. Like, there was the trade deadline, but nobody ever talked about it because there wasn't a single trade that was actually going down. I think they might be even a little bit better, Kevin, holding off maybe another week or 2, because then you really start to say, we're not in it at this point. But when you have 7 wild card spots and you have a team with 3 wins and let's just say 4 losses, are they really going to sell or say, you know what, coaches don't want to do it, general managers, because you can say, oh, hey, look, the owner gave me my blessing to sell, and at the end of the season they turn out to be 2-15, you get fired. Like, well, then I would just would have kept everybody, won 3 more games at this point and kept my job. I think if they push it back maybe an extra week, and also sometimes we see things play out that the Rams were up for sale before that one Thursday night game. We're even hearing stuff like Matthew Stafford's going to go. Cooper Kupp is up in the air. Anybody that you wanted on defense here, they win a game or 2, and now they're looking to be back in because that's 7th wild card spot.
And think about this. It's a 17-game schedule, right? So even the owners, too, from the business aspect, you have, 8-9 home games you you still want to make that gate. You put out an atrocious product, and you're just in a complete rebuild. Nobody's going to go out to watch that, right? And it can happen. We've seen it with Carolina, but that's not the ultimate goal. So we will see what happens over the next couple of weeks. Some of these teams, like the Giants, I mean, they dropped this game and they're 2-8, 2-9 down the stretch. I mean, what are you holding on to?
Well, yeah, I think again, it's all probably where you are within your process, right? But Max Crosby, like 8 times had to be like, I'm not asking out of Vegas, and I wonder if Vegas was like, ask him again.
Yes,
like please, like what?
It's not your decision.
Like this guy's way too loyal. This is killing us here. Devontae Adams played it correct.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a very interesting thing. There was one move that stood out for all the wrong reasons, which was the Dallas Cowboys bringing in Jonathan Mingo from the Carolina Panthers. Cowboys fans were quick to point out that they gave up, I think, as much, if not more, for Mingo that they got back for Amari Cooper, who has been since multiple times effective and traded for more than what they sent him out for there. The Dallas Cowboys, at the time of the Mingo move, were aware that they were 3-5 with an injured quarterback in Dak Prescott. No move that this team has done in the last 5 years is more, oh boy, Jerry, to me, I really like paying Dak or paying Zeke. There's a number of guys that would do that. Trading a 4th for Jonathan Mingo and during this season, that was we might have a much different problem on our hands situation for the Dallas Cowboys, Donnie.
Hey, by the way, you took a look at the Dallas Cowboys in the offseason. Forget about Jerry Jones said we're all in. But I actually appreciated the way, Joe, he was starting to play this season out. I'm not giving my coach an extension. Prove it. I'm not giving my quarterback an extension. Prove it. CD, you think you're going to get paid more than anybody else? Why don't you go out there and prove it this season? Let's win the division, and we'll pay everybody in the offseason, which includes Micah Parsons. A couple days before you start the regular season, these guys are getting paid now, and you see like, oh, phew, man, I don't have to worry anymore. I got career security with these paychecks, and everything has been up in smoke. But to Kevin's point, there should be coming a time where the Dallas Cowboys just have to hit the restart button. And it's okay. You don't have to hit the restart button with a new quarterback or even CeeDee Lamb. But there's a lot of players on that team that you could have traded for capital who apparently aren't working out in your favor that you could have made that move. And, yes, getting a wide receiver at the deadline that's going to help you cruise into not making the playoffs this year, it is laughable.
Yeah, maybe Jerry was watching his days at Ole Miss, those Rebels putting up points, especially yesterday against Georgia. But the problems aren't offensively, Kev, for Dallas. We've said this. Problems are defensively. Outside of Micah Parsons, who do they really have? I know they have Trayvon Diggs. He's been burdened multiple times this year. You mentioned Bland. He was, an interception machine last year, been hurt. But they have major question marks. They have no defense of identity. And I understand that injuries are a part of the game, but you have to step up. Zimmer wasn't the answer. That was Jerry's decision to bring in Zimmer, right? He was a good guy. They knew him, right? So that's all Jerry Jones making those calls.
Yeah.
At some times, now he has to look himself in the mirror and go, I created this. What are you going to do? You pay Dak, you pay CD, and you now have the foundation, quarterback and wide receiver. You have nothing else. You have a glass house.
But the wild thing, and we're about to break down today's game between Dallas and Philadelphia, is Dak gets injured. Man, everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people thought they weren't going to pay him. And then we were going to the year was going to play out.
Yep.
Do they have buyer's remorse? Do you think?
I don't think so. Because when he's healthy, he is solid. And apparently he needs a bigger supporting cast than anybody else in the NFL, where it's like, well, what did you want him to do without Brandon Cooks? Well, you still got an unbelievable wide receiver, and you should be able to move the football. But for me, once you saw he was injured, you just reset this year. You get a high draft pick, and you try again next year. Because as Joe pointed out, you have those two. Micah Parsons is going to reset the bell for defense. You have no money left over.
Yeah.
It's bizarre to, the vibe has been off all year.
I'll just throw this. Derrick Henry would have looked real good in that outfit.
Couldn't afford him, Joe. Couldn't afford him.
Let's talk about the Cowboys and the Eagles next right here on Pro Football Today.
Together, both Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, it's going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long.
What in the world is going on in Miami, guys?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
In Dallas, we see the Cowboys and the Eagles, and oddly, as usual, one of either Dak or Hurts not out there. For division rivals, these two have hardly played against one another. I think last year was the first time they each were out there for both of the games between Philadelphia and Dallas, if memory is serving correctly there. It's just an odd thing that's been going on again for a few seasons, and it's here again. So now the Philadelphia Eagles, instead of what would have probably been short road favorites, -1.5, maybe a game even pick, the Philadelphia Eagles are a 7.5-point favorite against Cooper Rush. It makes for a tricky game here, DRS, because Cooper Rush has pulled off some upsets for the Dallas Cowboys. Could he do it again today?
No, I don't think he does it again today, but I do think it's going to be competitive. If you say right now, what's the best way that you think this game is going to go? The chances for the Eagles to have a blowout victory means double digits or more, which is a possibility, or will this game be finishing under the 7.5? To me, it's probably going to be more likely a close game. Cooper Rush isn't a guy that's just going to step in as a rookie. Like, remember Ben DiNucci started against the Philadelphia Eagles? I remember quite fondly. He was absolutely abysmal in that game. You're not going to get that out of Rush. He'll be competent. He's got weapons out there, and that can happen. But having said that, this is a dead team walking here, and that's the Dallas Cowboys, where the Philadelphia Eagles, again, have that tough game. We talked about Washington coming up on Thursday night. I don't think it's a look-ahead situation. It's the Cowboys and it's the Eagles, two hated rivalries. But here's the problem I have, Joe, with the Philadelphia Eagles. If they come into this game healthy, which apparently they are, this should be an easy victory for them. But you have Devonta Smith, wide receiver, struggling with a hamstring injury. Last week, you know who left the game? A.J. Brown with the knee injury. Did practice this week. Dallas Goedert coming off a hamstring injury, getting back in the lineup. And, oh, yeah, your quarterback, leaked out by your head coach this week, has an ankle injury. Joe, when I look at the top guys in the lineup for the Eagles, yes, if they're healthy, yes, they should win easy. But it's one of those games where I don't know if I can even bet prop bets outside of one guy I'll tell you about later here.
I like Dallas with the points here. Divisional matchup. I think it's a lower scoring game. Dallas hasn't won a game at home all year long.
Wow.
That's it.
Oh,
it could be a
good.
smash job.
Oh, this is good.
Here's the thing. You couldn't win with Dak Prescott and C.D. Lamb in terms of lighting it up. Right now, here comes a backup quarterback, a veteran in terms of Cooper Rush. We saw Rico Dowdle rush for over 70 yards against the Atlanta Falcons. I think he'll have a heavier part along with the other running backs to take the pressure off of Rush, especially in keeping him in short and minimal third down type of situations. I like Jalen Tolbert over the 27.5. I think he can get to 50 or 60. But give me Dallas. We saw it the same thing. New Orleans and Carolina. Similar spread, right? Home dog in terms of this situation with a divisional matchup. Give me the points, but I'll lean to the under 43.5. I thought that line opened earlier in the week at 41.5. It's up 2 points. I like the under, but I'll take the points with Dallas.
So when I initially looked at this game, I thought to myself, the only way you could bet this is Dallas, home division dog, touchdown, da-da-da-da-da. I look at what Cooper Rush was able to do back in 2022. He wins the first 4 games. He's covering. He's pulling off upsets. His final game was actually against Philadelphia. It was the only time he didn't score 20 points or the offense didn't score 20 in that game, and they ended up scoring 17. I think reason why today people are probably still lining up to bet the Eagles in droves, aside from the fact that they're the best team in football, is the Dallas Cowboys this year are much worse than the teams Cooper Rush was filling in for prior. Both sides of the ball. For me, though, Joe, where the main disagreement comes in is I love the over in this game at 43.5. Because I think Cooper Rush has shown, look, he is not replacing top 5 QB Dak. He is replacing bottom 20 quarterback Dak. It's what he's been this season. It just is. And CeeDee Lamb's going to be out there giving it a go. That Philadelphia Eagles defense is playing really good. The refs, again, flipped it on its head and gave Jacksonville points they should have never had. But I think the Philadelphia Eagles, sometimes when you play that backup quarterback, you fall asleep. Like, I'm still not entirely positive that the Georgia defense didn't fall asleep because they thought Dart was out of the game, and then they never woke back up somehow against Ole Miss. So I don't know if the Eagles are going to have their best defensive effort of the season, but I still trust the Philadelphia offense because I still think the most under-discussed thing is the Eagles with A.J. Brown. Like what I just said, right, Donnie, I understand it gets a reaction out of you of me saying they're the best team in football.
Yeah.
But with A.J., it's what they are. They're 5-0. They're scoring 29.4 points per game. It was the second biggest margin of victory that game if you look at what everybody else has done this year. That is who the Eagles have been. And A.J., by the way, didn't play in the second half against Jacksonville here. Gets to go out there and give it a go today. I think there's countless paths to us getting points here at 43.5.
And I'm with you on this. And again, I'm usually sometimes cautious at this point because if they're supposed to all play today.
Yeah.
And if they do, that's a bad Dallas defense. And we're also, the one guy we haven't brought up today is Saquon Barkley, who's an absolute runaway freight train against a team that's a sieve against the run with a very good offensive line that the Eagles have. If you're putting pressure on Dallas, I think that can work to your advantage. I just get a little bit leery because you're right about that. When A.J. Brown does play and he's healthy, he is a destroyer out there. And if he is today, which he's supposed to be, that's great. But I just understand how injuries work, and you get injured 1 week there, and I get a little bit nervous. I do think the Philadelphia Eagles win this football game. But again, if these guys are healthy and play today, the full 4 quarters, the Eagles will cover. I'm just not so sure about that.
Yeah, that's the concern that I have. Plus, they have a short week coming up, right, against Washington. That's always a cause of concern. But here's the other one as well on the Dallas side. They've been absolutely blown out at home, absolutely abused, right, in every game. So now with Cooper Rush and knowing that the pressure's on, the game plan's got to be, let's get it into the fourth quarter. Let's be competitive somehow, some way. Sometimes that's just shortening the game, short to intermediate throws, running the football, not light it up, because we know that Mike Zimmer has absolutely no answers on how to coach a defense. So that would be the way I think McCarthy goes more conservative, and that's why I lean to the under, but I do like the points.
Here's the thing, Joe. I think everything you said makes sense, but I just think it goes the exact opposite way.
It's a chess match that'll play out. Somebody's going to win it.
Like, to me, like if you take the temperature of Dallas, right? Dak's like, I don't want to go on IR, and you're trying to shut me down. And Dallas is like, yeah, season's over. Paid you a lot.
Yes.
You're done.
Yes.
To me, I think McCarthy, Lisa, it's a who cares? You always say, hey, go out there, open it up. Like, first play, flea flicker, 85-yard deep shot. Like, that is, to me, what the Dallas Cowboys should be. This is McCarthy's chance to save his job, by the way. Right. Looking competent with Cooper Rush at quarterback is oddly, the Dak injury was the only thing that could save his job. This is the only way it happens here. I'm not saying that he will save it, but I think that this game's going to have a lot of points. You mentioned Saquon's season, Offensive Player of the Year odds, very interesting.
together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the two big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I'm ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, guys?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orgy as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
Back at you right here, man. Pro Football Today. My
boy.
absolute favorite show in the world. Kevin Walsh, Donnie Rightside, and Joe Lisi. So we just talked a little Eagles-Cowboys, and I thought it would be a nice little transition into your Offensive Player of the Year race because we did see on Thursday Derrick Henry do what he always does. He scored in every single game this season. Only one game he didn't have a rushing touchdown. Well, he then caught a touchdown, and he just finds a way, right? DRS, you saw Lamar get tackled at the 1. You knew what that meant. Boom, Derrick Henry gets in. Now, for Derrick Henry's level this season, it was an underwhelming game. Only 68 yards and the 1 touchdown. Didn't really add much of anything in the receiving game. That's par for the course. This race, which was initially expected to be wide receiver heavy. Tyreek Hill, the favorite. Yes, McCaffrey was in the mix, and then Lamb, Chase, Jefferson. It is, at the moment, a 2-man show with Derrick Henry and then Saquon Barkley. Do you think DRS Henry left the door open for Saquon against Dallas to become the favorite if he has a big game here?
I mean, I can't say no. Like, if he goes out there for $175 and 2 scores and is the catalyst for the Eagles' offense today,
is that how high it needs to be, though?
That's how high he needs to be, yes, because I still do think they are 1 and 1A for a reason. And the reason being is the 1A is Derrick Henry because he gets those touchdown opportunities, which Saquon Barkley technically doesn't get. Saquon Barkley better score from the 10 yards out because he's not getting those goal line carries. But if you're asking me now, also from a national spotlight, I do think Derrick Henry is getting even more press than Saquon Barkley, as crazy as that sounds. I agree it should be minus 150 plus 250, but that could change. Like the NFL, and we're not just talking about, hey, well, if one guy gets injured. Saquon Barkley has the ability every single week to put up 100-plus yards and also a touchdown. It's just a matter if he gets it. I trust more in the rest of the regular season, Joe, with Derrick Henry continuing to getting those goal line carries where I don't know if Saquon Barkley can get those.
I think if Saquon does start, just racking up yards the way Christian McCaffrey did, not just rushing. What did he do, $159 last week? But the play where he's jumping over people, he's making multiple touchdowns. We saw him receive a touchdown against Jacksonville, right? You're having multiple opportunities and touches. I think that's an opportunity in that type of situation where he could overcome Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's still not utilized in regards to the screen game or the short to intermediate passing game. That's an opportunity down the stretch where Saquon could potentially catch him if he puts up dynamic numbers. I think from a lottery perspective, you look at that list and you say, okay, outside those two, you want to take a flyer. the two kids from LSU, if they just go off, and more Jefferson than Chase, because Chase right now is secondary where the team is, right? Minnesota's still fighting for playoff contention. If Justin Jefferson puts up 200-yard performances week in and week out, I'm not saying he's going to, but he's capable of, that's at the value 14 or 16 to 1 wherever he is. That's a great lottery ticket down the stretch.
So what I'll just quickly say on the Saquon Henry race is I think Derrick Henry is benefiting from the fact he's played 2 more games than Saquon at the moment this week, and then they haven't had their bye week yet. I know Saquon is going to struggle to catch him in touchdowns. Saquon's at currently 8 total. Henry's at 14 total scores. Saquon does average more yards per game. I don't have a good sense if this is going to come down to a team thing. But if it does, I'm telling you that will end up favoring Philadelphia. I think the schedule is more so there for it than it is for Derrick Henry. I think it's very interesting that both guys get this argument of what they've done for their teams, because that is where it would have been a separator. Like if one of them was going against McCaffrey, the separator would have been, man, Saquon's transformed Philly, or Henry's transformed Baltimore. They both get to make that argument. You mentioned Jamar Chase, Joe, and Chase currently has 10 receiving touchdowns. Next closest player, shout out to him, Mike Evans, because that's what Mike Evans does, as well as George Kittle. But with 6, I wonder how high Chase can get on that touchdown number. I think he'd have to get very high. I'm not sure, because look, Chase isn't going to win it with record, but we already kind of know that. I don't think Jay Jettis isn't having a season of his caliber, I think, to win. I think Jay Jettis, hey, can we get 2,000 yards? Like, that's the bar he set for himself. Only I think 5 touchdowns for Justin Jefferson. Can Jamar Chase get, can he get 17 touchdowns? He's played 10 games, he has 10 touchdowns. Can we get 20 touchdowns out of Jamar Chase?
Well, if he duplicates what we saw on Monday night, or Thursday night, anything's possible. The yards after the catch are amazing. That's what he brings to the table, right? We talk about him and Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's always open, but Jamar Chase could take an 8-yard hitch and take it to the house. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he can do. So you have the opportunity to put up 200-yard performance.
By the way, quickly on Chase, let's talk business, too. I did bet Cincinnati to make the playoffs here after their game. It's a good little price. But after that, why don't you shut him down at the end of the season if you can't make the playoffs? He's got big money coming.
Right. Yeah. No. Well, he might shut himself a little pop the hat. We'll talk some MVP race, which is all tied into the Offensive Player of the Year.
Together, both Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson had huge nights. Aaron Rodgers loves the 2 big targets, and he says if this is going to happen, it's going to be very tough on the defense to decide who they want to go after.
Adams and this kid, Wilson, I won't deny what they can do, but nobody else does jack.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions. Once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.